In our three-part series, we saw how Rolex rose to power, how they capitalized on that now with their acquisition of Bucherer, and now finally, if there was a brand or a conglomerate that was like, you know what, I am not happy, I am sick of Rolex dominating the market, and they're only getting more aggressive, so we need to figure out a way where we can become more relevant or more equal. That's what we're talking about today. How would that actually happen now that Rolex has taken a huge step up?
What is up, Watch fam? I am Christian, the curator of the Theo and Harris Vintage Watch Shop.
My name is Michael, and this video is sponsored by my chair at home, FlexiSpot.
I love FlexiSpot.
Yes, me too.
Talk more about them later. What are you wearing today?
I am wearing an
Third day in a row. Third video in a row.
G-Shock, baby.
This three-part video, right? This trilogy has been great. I had a lot of fun. Michael and I have been sitting in these chairs for hours talking about Rolex, and it's really fascinating. Today's episode is really great, but we've worn these G-Shocks the entire time, despite the fact that we both wore Rolexes here. But we put on our G-Shocks once we got here because we were opening up and we were excited. We ordered them together. Super cool. Neither of these watches, of course, are available in the Theo and Harris Watch Shop. That shop is reserved for beautiful vintage watches from brands like Rolex and Omega and Tudor and Patek Philippe, time and again. We also sell a whole bunch of straps. We've got a ton of colors, all handmade. I highly suggest you go on over there and take a look. We have our new Lorenzo roll as well, which is absolutely beautiful. So go take a look at the Theo and Harris shop. It keeps everything here going.
So, obviously, Rolex is doing all this stuff, but we have to pick a competitor. We have to pick the David versus the Goliath. You can pick a different brand if you'd like, but I would say it is both Omega and Swatch Group.
As one.
As well, we could split it if we really wanted to.
Right. Omega's the only brand really with a shot at, closing the gap between them and
We're
Rolex.
not even talking surpassing. I think that's a silly conversation.
Right.
But
Omega represents 7%, I think you said, of Swiss watch exports. Rolex represents 30%. I think even on other levels, on cultural levels, even independent of sales. I mean, Omega's great. I love Omega. God, I love Omega.
You probably have heard of Omega. You've definitely heard of Rolex.
Right. Omega doesn't evoke that same almost ridiculous and hard to understand emotional response from the world, right? That Rolex does. I love Omega.
Of course.
That doesn't change the fact that Rolex is the king.
Speedmaster may be my favorite watch of all time, but
it's too big on your wrist.
It's too big on my wrist. Everybody knows that.
So here's the way I look at it.
Okay.
Of course, Rolex is Goliath and Swatch Group is David.
Which is a ridiculous thing right away.
Come on, let's be fair, man. Like, Rolex is this huge, just totally vertically integrated. They own everything. Just huge monster, right? Huge. And then Swatch, I mean, it's named after Swatch, for God's sakes. They make little pink watches that I like. I mean, they're the good guys, right? They own little brands too.
They made the Moon Swatch.
They make the Moon Swatch. They own little brands too, and they're good, and we like them. And Omega's nicer, and you can get one, and they're great.
Theoretically, this battle would be Goliath, and then David with all of his friends on his shoulders, like swaying back and forth like a huge sword.
You're right, but look at it from a different point of view.
Or rock.
Rolex is, an independently owned company, right? I mean, Rolex is
not a conglomerate.
Rolex is a brand.
Gobbling up things.
It's a brand. Right. Their entire existence is to advance a single cause without compromise.
It begs a question of, when you get an Omega, are you like, man, I love what the Swatch Group is doing. Like, the Swatch Group. I'm just in love with the story of the Swatch Group.
Rolex tells every one of their stories with the greatest passion. Mm-hmm. The Swatch Group, and I love the Swatch. I love their brands.
They made the Moon Swatch.
And they also, and I'll talk about this more on Patreon where I can be a little bit more candid.
Yeah.
But the Swatch Group, because they have so many different competing interests, right? I mean, they are very careful and frankly stifle many of these brands so that they don't compete too directly and cannibalize.
And of course,
but who is that good for? But the beast at Swatch Group. It's certainly not good for everyone else, right? Maybe it's good for one big player. It's good for Omega, maybe. But for everyone else, it's hard. Swatch Group is very much stay in your lane.
You are going to, even if you were at this tier, we need to put you a tier below because you can't step on Omega.
Rolex is a liberator.
There is no pyramid. It's Rolex.
It's Rolex, and Rolex is okay. There's Tudor, and Rolex picks Tudor up because the delta is so wide. Tudor's never going to steal from Rolex. So Rolex is picking up his little brother. Swatch is the grandpa saying, "You better know your place."
Yeah.
So I would say, really, Rolex is the good guy, which is nuts, which is insane.
The guy dominating the market is also in this. The good guy that's like, I'm going to work really hard.
Of course. Now, of course, this is a complicated conversation and it's not perfect. And, of course. But I do think that that's basically correct. Okay. Rolex is an inspirational story of independence.
Right.
Swatch Group is not.
It is a crazy fact that the biggest watch brand in the world is also independent.
Right.
Or it might not even be that crazy when you think about it.
Swatch Group is a great story about, a family that did a lot to resurrect and maintain and preserve history.
True.
With a bunch of asterisks on the side because they also have done plenty to get in the way of.
But I mean, they made the moon swatch.
Of the children they own, Yeah. So it's all very fast. It's all really very fascinating. So the question becomes, how could, and I agree with you that Swatch Group's the only one that could really rival, right? Richemont brands they're great brands and they're just money.
Exactly.
Right? Like they're just making money, right?
This video is brought to you by FlexiSpot, specifically both things that I have, the E7 desk and the ergonomic chair, which have actually changed how I work, because I work at the computer basically all day. And now, instead of just sitting, I spend my time sitting, then standing, then sitting, then standing, then sitting, then standing. And I learned, I had an old kind of writer's desk, which was great. I had an old chair that went along with it. I learned how much better it can actually be and how much better it can make you feel.
Oh my God. I've noticed the difference even in talking to Michael during the day. Again, chomping away at the computer just constantly. I mean, it's really not good for us. The way that we deal with technology in our lives is very unhealthy. We're always hunched, and it's just bad for our health.
Incredibly,
and it's bad for our demeanor and everything. And it totally changed the way you feel during the day.
100%. And not to mention that this is basically the best deal you can get in dual motor desks.
Right.
It rises up. I do the demo sitting on it when I show my friends. Then I rise it up. It's fantastic, and it's incredibly stable. You can have water on the desk, whatever it may be. It won't shake or topple. And then the chair, which is the new thing that I got, it's fantastic. You don't know that you're sitting in a bad chair until you sit in a really nice chair.
Yeah.
This one has support for your lower back, makes you feel better during the day, and both of these are incredibly solidly built.
Yes.
And to make everything even better, FlexiSpot has their Labor Day sale happening right now. You can use our code Theo and Harris for up to 60% off on orders over $500 at the link below.
I highly recommend you go do that. Thanks to FlexiSpot, and go get a FlexiSpot. The only culturally important Richemont brand is Cartier.
Yeah.
And to a much smaller degree, Van Cleef, which is on the level of Vacheron, but even Vacheron, which is a great brand, I love.
Yeah, we're not saying any of these brands
are bad. Different awards that I'm giving,
of course,
right? But so far as just cultural giant, it's Omega, right? And they're nothing compared to Rolex,
right?
So the question is, what does Omega do to keep up or continue to work toward closing that gap? What do they do?
Well, I want me to go with the most ridiculous
idea
idea first.
Go for it.
The most ridiculous idea, obviously, let's remove the Swatch bandage, or I don't even want to say bandages, the Swatch restrictions, right? Omega makes their own version of a Tudor. This is their sub-market thing. They can experiment more. They can draw on history. Maybe obviously not with a separate brand, but hey, we used to do this. We used to do that. This is where we introduce a totally different style. We don't have to have the twisted lugs anymore. The Speedmaster doesn't have to look like that. It doesn't even need to be called a Speedmaster. It could be a different chronograph. That is a new thing that the main reason, obviously you'll sell more watches, but the main reason is for the watch nerds, for the watch world, that I would think also kind of generally slowly bleeds out into public understanding, is that you now are more exciting in the news because there's a new brand owned by a brand everybody loves that's doing new things while using technology from Omega.
Makes sense.
This is the most long shot idea ever.
Definitely won't happen.
You compete with crazy... No, of course not. You compete with crazy logo. You compete with just total watch nerd stuff. And then you hope that acts as a relationship where you're kind of hoisting each other up.
Well, I definitely agree with. I understand a lot of all what you're saying. I agree with quite a bit of it, but like I definitely do think that Omega should be not the first priority, but of the priorities, should be dedicating time and resources to this. Creating better watches than Rolex.
Of course.
I think that is certainly a step in the right direction. Not the most important step, but it is a step.
I would say that's the most insane idea. It's really a PR move. But watches, like you said, are not what we should even be focusing on at that point.
It's culture, right?
Sure, yeah.
That's it. I mean, Rolex now is very conservative in their marketing because Rolex is the king, and Rolex has earned the right to be conservative in their marketing.
Yeah.
I don't think that Omega has earned the right to have such a casual approach.
A star-studded lack of depth.
There's not a lot of ingenuity coming from Omega on the communication front. Period. That does not mean that the people at Omega that do marketing aren't doing a good job. They're doing plenty of good work. There's not a question there, right? The PR people do an incredible job. There's a lot of great stuff coming from Omega, on the marketing front. But I do think that they are missing a truly powerful, what would need to be a little totalitarian voice on their team to say, we need to be bolder. We need to take a little bit more risk, right? Super calculated risk, of course, but risk, right? We need to adopt more native social media. We need to do that.
We need to find, Rolex being as conservative as they are with their marketing, we need to find what they're not doing and become the masters of that.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
And it's all these little things, right? Rolex, because they no longer market so aggressively, in that sense, there's branding everywhere, but so far as actual brand messaging, it's more relaxed now, or it's more ivory tower.
Speak for themselves, yeah, of course.
You know what it reminds me of? It's very similar. Whether you're watching a whatever old movie, it could be any cultural crime movie, right?
Yep.
And it's the old criminal doesn't need to tell you, if you fuck with him, he'll shoot you, because you already know he will.
Right.
Because he did it 1,000 times over the last 6 decades. Be very weary of an old man in a sport where men die young.
You're right.
Rolex has earned that right to sit there and kind of just...
Our watch, if we put out a watch, you'll do the marketing.
My legacy speaks for myself.
Yeah.
You're already afraid when you walk in the door. Omega is not a little young kid.
No.
By no means. But they're still in their 30s, and they're still earning that rep. And I don't think they've earned it yet.
Which is fascinating to say, obviously, because they do the Olympics. They've been...
and that's all great. I'm not saying those efforts are wasted. They went somewhere in space.
Which was huge. But,
Mission to Mars.
Oh, yeah, they went to
the Moon Swatch.
Yeah, right. Oh, well, they made the Moon Swatch. That's pretty huge. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing that they did... They are doing very monumental things, but they're not advertising like primally. It's still very much like you did all this stuff, and then you have George Clooney like smiling.
Exactly.
Like, what happened?
I think that it's great that they have this beautiful list of celebrity ambassadors. I think that's great. Like Eddie Redmayne, I don't know who that is. I don't know what any of these people are, but I know they matter. They matter. I get it.
To many, many people.
But it's not enough. That's the point.
Yeah.
And I think that if Omega, I happen to think that the folks at Omega, like a lot of companies, they've experienced a lot of success in the last 10 years, and this is what happens. I don't think they're open to actually entertaining the idea that they may not know everything.
Yes.
But that happens all the time. I'm sure it's happening at Rolex too.
Sure.
Right? I'm sure it happens at every company.
Yeah.
But I do think that happens. That's happened at Omega and Swatch Group in general, and Richemont Group for that matter. I'm not singling anybody out. Everyone is basically guilty of this. The reason I'm pointing out Omega is because Omega has the opportunity.
It's that old guy that says to the young guy who's about to make history, no, this is how it works. This is how the market works.
Right. So it's that's the difference. That's the next level in my view for Omega. They've turned their brand completely around. They've improved their catalog. They've improved their points of sale. They've done so much. And I do think in the next 3 years, I think they're going to stop seeing the growth that they've been seeing.
Really?
Well, like everything, right? Once you capture all the land that really was was yours, should have been yours anyway, and now you start to really encroach on land that is not yours, that's when the growth stops.
Well, you think encroaching would be they're continuing their momentum in terms of how they're advertising, but they're just going into uncharted territory, or
on market share. Your growth, the growth that Omega's experienced in the last 8 years or 10 years has been phenomenal.
Right.
But they always should have been that large. Omega was underachieving for years, right? So it's like, you know what I mean?
Well,
just because you used to be slow doesn't mean that, and you're faster now, doesn't mean that you're the fastest person in the world and you can't be stopped.
Oh, okay.
That's the point.
The question was, are you saying they're pulling back on the throttle, or whatever they're traveling in needs to be updated?
Needs to be updated.
Okay,
That's it.
Got it.
Because you got up to 7%, right? You increased your business by billions of dollars, I'm sure.
Over the years.
Well, what about the next billion or the billion after that? I don't think that their system is equipped for it. I just don't. And listen, so many of these solutions will be had in ways that we're not even thinking about, right? Like,
of course, yeah.
Omega's entire bottom line could change if they increased their success with their little ladies models, right? Like that alone. And we would never notice. As watch people, we would never notice that
they have the
Omega,
second most popular women's watch in the world.
Omega made an extra $600 million this year because the little Aquaterra did well. We would never know that.
Exactly.
But that's how that's how the watch business works. So I'm not saying that just all this sort of different marketing is the answer to everything. Right. That's why you require multiple teams, because no one man or woman can do they can oversee it and they can understand a grand plan.
Of course.
But this requires just teams and teams of people that are dedicated to their lane, right? Whether it's to PR, whether it's the cultural adoption of these female watches, to make sure that right after you buy a love bracelet, you don't buy a Panthera, you buy an Omega, right?
Have to get the Omega. Cartier is jewelry now. Omega is what I've heard is XYZ.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's all those little things. It's all those little things that they totally can do it. They can totally do it. They can totally continue to increase their business by significant percentages every year. The Moon Swatch was something that Omega didn't even like.
Yeah, but they did make it.
And it increased their sales exponentially.
Yeah.
Right? These are the little ways in which, maybe they don't matter to some people, right? To some people out of the company, but Swatch Group saw the grander plan for the P&L. Right? Swatch Group saw that this stupid little toy is going to make us a lot of money on both ends.
And it did.
And Omega's going to make money too. And if they don't, it doesn't matter because we made money through the Swatch.
And we own Omega.
So it's okay. What are we going to pay Omega a licensing fee? What are we going to give ourselves money?
Yeah. Exactly.
No, I own both of you. Now stop bickering.
Wow.
So it's really interesting stuff.
Well, so that is how you would see Omega closing the gap.
Whether you're a Submariner guy or a 50 Fathoms guy or a Day-Date guy or an FP Journe guy, you've got to just take a step back and appreciate this history here. This isn't stuff you're going to find in a showcase. This is not mass-produced stuff, which is beautiful in its own right. This is treasure hunting.
What is your my wild thing being Omega starts their own, basically a second brand that gets a lot of PR, gets a lot of headlines. What's as wild as you can go?
I don't think that the wildest thing that I could see, and it won't happen.
No, it's not based on logic.
Okay, yeah, the wildest thing that I could see that certainly won't happen is in episode 2, I alluded to Saudi investors coming in and taking brands to next levels.
Sure.
Okay,
taking ADs or brands?
ADs. But what's at an AD but brands?
Okay, sure.
Right?
Yep.
And they can really selectively, pick which brands are there, right?
Get them going.
I don't think that the next level of brilliance on the AD front is going to come from Switzerland. Mm-hmm. I don't. The Swiss they're different and they're just different culturally. Things don't happen as quickly. Things are...
We've heard also many times, we have to run this by Switzerland. They're a lot stricter than us.
There's a lot of politics,
yes.
Right? And listen, they got there, so it clearly works.
Yes.
But there's a danger in totalitarianism.
Sure.
But there's an allure, too, to not having gridlock. Right? In government, it's not good. Gridlock is a good function, right? But when it comes to brand building, it sometimes it takes someone to come in and say, listen, enough with the fucking bureaucracy. Let's go. I'll invest, let's say, $1 billion or $3 billion or whatever it is, because we want, right? The idea of Tourbillon was okay. It was good in principle, but you didn't do it right. I know how to do it. Let's create the most magnificent watch boutiques in the world, all over these cities, not just standalone Omega, but let's really partner in on making this incredible.
You thought that was an event. This is the actual event. And basically you're saying an outside eye that looks over all the ideas, all the rejected ideas, and is like, these are brilliant.
Some of these are great.
Why didn't these go anywhere?
100%.
And someone's like, well, they got cut off because it's not our market.
100%. And these deals could never happen without Swatch Group, right? It couldn't be on a brand level. It would need to be, like, the group would need to basically agree, right? On the other side, obviously, if they don't want to get the brands involved and do these brand boutiques where it's only Swatch Group, they could just again, buy ADs and do wonders for the brands. If a new player to the watch industry wanted to buy a major boutique in a major American city or a major European city or whatever, the brand partnership already exists. They're not going to revoke the license because you invested more money in the boutique. You know, then they'll end up sidling up and being friends and all that stuff, and that's all well and good, but that's the only thing I can think of on the actual brand structure, and the communication I think needs to be improved. But if you really want to talk about brand experience, a lot of it is brick and mortar. Yes. I don't think, one of the problems with the way that the Saudis tend to invest in things is that they're so rich that they go over the top where it's not a positive ROI. You've got to be careful as well. You can't just be ridiculous, even though you've got the money to burn. You want something that's everlasting. You want something that's going to last. But maybe it's in experiences. It's a lot of brands have moved that way. Right, into creating really deep relationships. Right, you're not just going to walk into an Omega boutique and leave without something. Right, I mean, look at LVMH. Look at how they've structured their thing, and they haven't done it in the watch front as much. But
I mean, you said it when we were at an event. You're like, wow, they own that brand. That they are what you drink, they are what you wear, and they are what you sit on.
That's it.
It's everything.
You leave with something.
Right.
They don't do that in watches, really. Maybe that's a big part of it. Like, all these little things could make up such a big portion of a potential bottom line, like a successful year or successful trajectory. So these are my thoughts.
Well, they're going to do none of it. So
nothing's. You know what's going to happen? Absolutely nothing. Rolex is going to continue to grow because they have autonomy and they've got a really, really big set of balls, and they don't report to anybody. That's it. They report to themselves.
When you report to too many people, all of a sudden you find yourself being like, yeah, well, that's where we are in the market. Like, that's kind of our target.
What was that thing that we were supposed to do? Never did it.
Oh, the moon swatch.
Whatever, didn't matter. Yeah, exactly. And that's it. That really is.
Yeah, truly. So that is the whole, from the beginning of Power to now, where it's the level, like I said, with Apple, obviously it's two different companies, but where you're like, wow, you are incredibly powerful. Like, to the point where I'm like, wow, what damage are you going to cause to the rest of the industry? Or what innovation are you going to force from the rest of the industry?
Right.
But that's it.
That's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, physically go ahead and like it and subscribe to our channel. And of course, go ahead down below and subscribe to our Patreon over on The Zero. We release podcasts every week, and I'd love to see you over there. If I do see you over there, shoot me a DM, and we'll chat about watches.
Yeah.
That's it.